Greetings, my name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you and welcome. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, the Core New Core, my patrons, Clayton, Ruby, Stephanie, and Jonathan, and anyone interested in surviving and thriving as a Pilates instructor or student. 3 things on the list today, 3 titles, and the first one is, we talked about lists yesterday, exercises in the order that they're in. So when I'm talking about a list, I'm talking about exercises arranged in a particular order. And so just to offer a going out the door addition to or reflection on our discussion yesterday, the only list that matters is Joe's mat list, the list of exercises in Joe's book. Right? And then, okay, so that was like number 1, right? And I would suggest considering that it's the only list that matters, not because it's necessarily the perfect list or the complete list, but it is the only list that matters because that is the list that Joe published in his book. So that's why it matters to me. That's number 3 of the 3 things I want you to be able to explain to whatever level you feel like explaining them. And this is coming from then number 2 today. Oh, and wait a second. Before I get to number 3, I got to do number 2. You often heard me talk about the spectrum of Pilates in terms of the attitude toward Pilates either having no essence of its own to the other end of that spectrum where Pilates has an essence of its own. Okay? And just one way of trying to discern or get a context for the culture in which we live. And I've often made note about how at the end of the spectrum where Pilates has no essence of its own, it's much more convenient to indulge in and monetize than it is to present a more restricted point of view insofar as Pilates having an essence of its own. Now, from the point of view of MMP, what's in Joe's book by virtue of 1, 2, and 3, his definition, his promise, and his sequence, you get to an ideal that is an experience. Why does that matter? Because in making a discernment about Pilates having an essence of its own, there's what I would say is another point of view where, of course, Pilates has an essence of its own, but it's unknowable. It's mysterious. You're always finding more out about the mystery that will always be a mystery. why I take notes. The unknown and the unknowable is a way to embrace any subject unattainable, in that whatever you're after from this pursuit is really unattainable. It's mystical. The whole thing is mystical, and I come back to my appreciation for the word sacred. It's all sacred to us in such personal ways that there's nothing that could make Pilates something that was knowable or that was attainable. See? There's confusion to me about what's personal and what's universal. And as a Pilates instructor, you want to know what's universal, and you deliver that. And then however that makes a connection personally to your student is whatever they bring into the picture. But did I say that part of that whole thing about it's out, sure it has an essence, but it's out there and it's unknowable and unreachable. That whole attitude goes with you'll never be good enough attitude. The whole thing about I'll never be good enough and I'm trying and I'm yet to reach any kind of a whatever they're reaching for, right? Humility is a good thing. I think living within the end of the spectrum that says, yes, Pilates has an essence, but it's unknowable. It's mysterious. Mystical. See? In some ways I agree with all that, and yet the MMP point of view considers our biology and the physics it finds itself in. So, within the end of the spectrum, it's like the spectrum splits off into two. And so yes, you can say, yes, Pilates has an essence of its own, but you'll never really get there or know it or be good enough, and it's always this immersion into a personal journey. Without need to, or connection to, or resonance to whatever might be there in and of its own essence. Because you can easily believe that it has no essence of its own anyway, so I'm taking it where Joe would have taken it if he were still here. And to that argument I say, Joe filmed his own mat work 40 years apart, and it was the same sequence of exercises. That's where MMP is coming from, based on the only list that matters is Joe's mat list, because within that is the obvious grammar from which one can get to speaking the language. And as a Pilates instructor, what you really want is the confidence to speak the language. And what does that mean? That means choosing what to say or do, or the instruction that you do next. Where does that come from? So, the MMP point of view is that Pilates has an essence of its own. Okay? Not only understandable intellectually, but that is sensational as well. So, I think much of the Pilates culture is pleasantly self-indulgent in the Pilates has a mystical, unknowable essence to it. It's there, but it's unknowable, and it's mystical and unexplainable. And so, on social media, a friend that I know and respect comes out with a text statement and a graphic that Pilates is more than, and I don't remember it word for word, but whatever it was about exercises. And I just got done talking about lists yesterday. And I just spilled my tea today. The only list that matters is Joe's mat list, because that contains the grammar that you use to speak the language in your own right, by your own authority. So, I said all that, I put that away. Talked about that, reviewed lists, and now here we are. Here we are with Pilates being something more than whatever was stated. And I couldn't help myself, and so I said, so if that's the case, then what is it? And the answer I got back is awareness, which is the number 3 title in my broadcast today. Awareness, knowledge or perception of a situation or fact. So, I wish we could just go to instantaneous conversation without a lot of contingencies that have to meet up to do live interaction. But in the answer I got back for, so what is it? The answer I got back in one word is awareness. Okay, awareness. And so I went and asked Google for awareness and got back knowledge or perception of a situation or fact. And knowledge to me is thinking, in terms of I'm a Pilates instructor and everything's about being, thinking, and observing, and my abilities to help a student coordinate that. And so knowledge and thinking seems to be okay, that capacity, or perception, and it would be interesting, to pursue perception further, but that's like if it's not knowledge, then what else is it? It's perception. And so that might be by sensing, right? Not thinking, but sensing. And then a favorite word of mine is observing, right? Because observing is not thinking. It's not what you know. It's not what you're thinking. It's something beyond the realm of thinking. But in that regard, awareness, is thinking or observing of a situation or fact. And so, in trying to interpret the situation or the fact, that is being thought about or observed, that situation or fact is what it is. And within MMP, it's called contrology, which is Joe's name for his method. It's right here, number 1. Contrology is complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit. Now, whatever you build upon or add to that, or however you change that, however close it is to the actual words of Joe, that's pretty classical. Because remember from yesterday, classical are, in my definition or my consideration, classical are pictures, words, and film of Joe. I mean, that Joe took or made of himself or his students. That's Joe. That's the original work of Pilates. Now, anything beyond that is part of the tradition of Pilates. Who you are and who you worked with and how long you did it and when you did it and what time period it was and all of those subtle distinctions in terms of lineage and aristocratic supposition. From my point of view, what I want you to know is that the MMP point of view, so if I were to say, well, okay, that's Joe's definition, but what is it? My very next definition would be Pilates is an experience, which is just making the statement that complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit is an experience. And what does that mean? That means, well, it's something that happens. My favorite phrase that you know is the state of being in the body in the moment of the doing. Pilates is so. If awareness is knowledge or perception of a situation or fact, then the question for me is, well, what's the situation? What's the fact? And to say that Pilates is just the knowledge of a situation or fact, or the observing of a situation or fact, it removes what Pilates is from being a situation or a fact. And to me, that situation is the complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit. And that's what you aim for in performing Joe's mat work. So you never go wrong by starting with Joe's definition. And then another good that I want to talk about, one word for Pilates is exercise, because it sets you up to go through the corrective exercise and observing and who's dancing with whom there. And this, in terms of awareness being perception, like that really is the observing of a situation or fact, but the situation of the fact that you have in doing Pilates is the experience, not the observing of it, not the knowing about it. You know what I'm saying? So just to be clear, within MMP, one point of view out of about thousands, the only list that matters is Joe's mat list from his book, within the point of view of MMP. From that you get the grammar, and from the grammar you speak the language, regardless of how much of the language, in terms of the words or the exercises that you know. You could be doing Pilates that's all original content that you're making up. If in its construction, consideration of the ideal participated. And somewhere along the line, you'll end up at where Joe started out, or see how closely what your creativity synthesized into what it became for you, and how it resonates with, or doesn't, Joe's original work. So I have my listers, yeah. No. Pilates is an experience, according to MMP. Life can't live forever. Read between the lines and see behind the curtain. Add two and two. Direct your thinking. Geist.